Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm really appreciative of everyone who's in attendance. In case you didn't get the memo, I'm John Tomkowiak, founding dean of the Elson Floyd College of Medicine. And what an excellent opportunity it is to be with university leadership today to hear a little bit about the university and get to ask some questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our leaders. We have President Kirk Schultz with us, and we have Provost and Executive Vice President Elizabeth Chilton. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Kirk. Thank you so much.
Great. John, thank you. Good morning. I had to look at the clock to make sure I knew what time it was. Good morning to all our colleagues here in the Elson Floyd College of Medicine. Really excited to spend a little time with you. We'll go through some university achievements and things like that, and then we'll also have, we think, plenty of time for questions and dialogue and discussion at the end. Would like to ask people that as you have questions, please post them in the chat. We'll get to those as we can or at the end, but if there's something that pops up while we're going through that you want to know a little bit more about, we'll try and manage those as we go through it. So. But I want to start off by really thanking all of you all as faculty and staff for the great work you've been doing in a really challenging times. It's challenging enough to start a new medical school from scratch, right? Without doing that in the midst of COVID-19 and all the challenges that makes to the way we work with our students, the way we educate, the way we work together as colleagues. So thank you. We've had a really remarkable year as a university, and so we're going to share some of that with you today. But I also want to emphasize, please make sure you're practicing good self-health, take care of each other, be kind to one another. We keep emphasizing that, and all of us are operating in a little bit of a stressful environment, and just sometimes taking that step back and thinking through what we do is good all the time, but especially around this time, I ask everybody to really try and do that. So with that, if I can get my first slide up, that'd be great. We'll get started. During the nursing town hall, I had some internet connectivity issues. So at one time I had 2 hotspots in our internet at our house, all trying to find a stable connection. Hopefully we won't have those issues this time. I went downstairs, and I'm an engineer, so I did what I would call a hard reset on our internet, which means I unplugged it, left it off for about 2 minutes, and plugged it back in. It looks like it's working better. So thank God I married an electrical engineer. Next slide, please. Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude to these original caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with the Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. We also pledge that these relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. So with that, I'm really pleased and excited to introduce to all of you our newest colleague on our leadership team, Dr. Elizabeth Chilton, Provost and Executive Vice President. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be joining you today for the town hall, and I look forward to interacting with each of you today and to doing so in person when we're able to do so. Next slide, please. I began my position as WSU's Provost and Executive Vice President just 8 weeks ago. I moved to Pullman from New York State in late June with my son, who's a rising college sophomore, and my husband, who like myself is a professor of anthropology. And we also brought with us our 2 rambunctious dogs, pictured there in the middle, in their favorite place, that is in the snow. My research specialization is the archaeology of Northeastern North America, particularly Native American technologies, ecology, and subsistence prior to European colonization. After spending 5 years at Harvard University post-PhD, I then was at UMass Amherst for 15 years as a faculty member, department chair, Center Director, and lastly, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research and Engagement. I then served as Dean of Arts and Sciences at Binghamton University in New York for 3 years before joining the Cougar community this summer. As I carefully consider the next 6 months, Kirk and I always talk about the fact that we love thinking about things from time to time that are not directly COVID related. And for me and for my office, some of the things that I'm really excited to work with you all on, first of all, creating meaningful and productive system-wide partnerships and addressing the issues of systemness that came up throughout my interview and continue to come up virtually every day in my work and engagement with you. Second of all, I bring a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Kirk and I are going to talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives that I'm looking to be involved in our presentation later on. And then finally, promoting and modeling a whole life philosophy for faculty and staff. Kirk sent out an email to the university community last week. And I really agree with everything you said, that really part of supporting equity and inclusion is being kind to ourselves and to one another, especially during these challenging times. So thank you again for attending today. I look forward to our discussion. Turn it back over to Kirk.
Great. So what we want to do today is spend a little time on some recent university highlights. I will do that. Elizabeth will talk about some College of Medicine highlights and kudos that we want to make sure that we're recognizing. I'll talk a little bit about some fiscal updates, and then we'll finish off with some initiatives and ongoing things we have this year that we think are important. Typically in the recent university highlights, it's been very data heavy over the last several years. As an engineer, man, I love data, I love graphs. I want to cram as many of those in as I can. But we felt this year, given that so many of us are on Zoom all the time, we were going to hit some different sorts of highlights and really minimize maybe some of the graphs and data that we'll tend to try and show. But when the Marcom people weren't looking, I jammed at least one or two in there, and we'll get to those. So next slide, please. Some recent institutional achievements, completion of our first WSU system 5-year strategic plan. We had always had a strategic plan for Pullman that was sort of what's good for Pullman is good for the system. And there was, the health sciences has grown and we established the Elson Floyd College of Medicine and other types of things, it became clear that we really need a system strategic plan on where we're going as a WSU system. And we also need a separate Pullman strategic plan that recognizes Pullman is a flagship campus, but it's an interconnected set of campuses, not a hub and spoke model. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. The launch of the new Center for Research in Emerging Infectious Diseases in Nairobi. WSU has had a long-standing relationship and work in Kenya. And what this center represents is a National Institute of Health grant for $7.6 million over 5 years. Continuing our work in that area, it's being led by Karuki Jenga, who is our most recent WSU faculty member to be inducted into the National Academy of Medicine. And we're really excited to continue that outstanding work in Africa. We have a new viticulture and enology program, and many of you that have been here for a while know that in our last campaign, we built a state-of-the-art wine science center in Richland, Washington on the campus of WSU Tri-Cities. We went to UC Davis, learned what they would say they should do, and we're able to really build that next generation research and teaching space right in the middle of wine country. Well, it turns out one of the other things the industry asks for is a specific degree geared toward enology and viticulture. And so Dean Andre Wright and his team have put that together to be housed in the Tri-Cities. And you can imagine our students can be in the classroom in the morning and right on a vineyard in that afternoon. And that relationship and work with industry is part of our land grant mission. Really pleased to see that program moving forward. The Transformative Change Initiative is run out of the Provost's office. It's a system-wide initiative. And this is really designed to enhance our ability to retain students. It's not just how many students we recruit, just like you all do in the College of Medicine. It's how do we retain those students and support them as they move through their educational program. And this is an area of opportunity for WSU, and we're already seeing some really nice successes in this space. Next slide, please. So we have several new faculty elected to the Washington Academy of Sciences. After my last presentation, I went downstairs, saw my wife, and she asked if I could count. She said, you listed 8 names, and it says 7 on the slide. Sure enough, after 3 times, I got the counting right. There's actually 8 faculty elected to the Washington State Academy of Sciences. We want to congratulate our colleagues Tim Basler in the Paul Allen School for Global Animal Health, Kelly Brayton in veterinary microbiology and pathology and veterinary medicine, Laura Griner Hill, who's Vice Provost for Faculty Development and Affairs and a Professor in Human Development and Connors, Alaire McLean, who's in Sociology and Arts and Sciences, Michael McDonald, who is in the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine, Sterling McPherson, also in the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine, then Katrina Mealy, who's a professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine, and Chin Zhang, who's professor and the director for the Center for Precision and Automated Ag Systems in the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences. I know that John Roll and others in the College of Medicine have been very active about nominating colleagues, and I want to take this opportunity to also suggest nominate deserving colleagues. The College of Medicine, you all have some exceptional world-class faculty here who easily should be in the Washington Academy of Sciences. So please nominate those individuals when you have that chance. We want to make sure that our colleagues are being recognized for the great work that they do. We also had 3 of our colleagues in the health sciences that were elected into the American Academy of Nursing. Renee Hochsel, Shelley Fritz, and Kakuv Shoshone will be inducted in late October. There were only 230 people inducted around the world, and it's great to have other colleagues that you all can partner with on research, scholarship, and advancing healthcare in the state of Washington. Finally, we want to recognize a little different award. Stephen Hines from the College of Vet Med was awarded 4th place in an international competition for some of the creativity and what he was doing in the classroom during COVID-19. And I know from my conversations with several faculty over time, as well as some of the deans and others, many of you are doing really creative, innovative things during this COVID-19 time. You know, some of it is, hey, we just got to get it done. We got to figure out a way to do it. But I appreciate the energy, the intellect, and the trying things out to see what types of things will work with our students in this type of learning environment. So Stephen received that award. I'm sure we're going to see many other of our faculty colleagues that also are recognized for creativity during this COVID-19 time. So next slide, please. Well, here's the graph I snuck in. I didn't sneak it in. I actually prepared it ahead of time. So congratulations to you all as faculty. Last year, WSU as a system did nearly $370 million in externally sponsored research. If you, that number is significant. If you look at the other schools that don't do quite that amount, it's quite a large list. And if I look at where we've gone for the last decade, it's really impressive. This is really a tribute to you as faculty. I like to remind outside audiences that nobody ever walks up to a faculty member and says, you know, here's a $10 million grant. You don't need to write anything. We're just going to give you the money. It doesn't work that way. And as you all know, you're competing against the very best in the country. You're winning. You're putting together great proposals with colleagues, either at WSU or other places, other universities, and just doing a fantastic job with that research. The College of Medicine, we learned yesterday, I think it's done somewhere around 70 million in total research since our establishment. And when you consider we're only 5 years old, that's a really impressive number for a brand new startup enterprise. And I know many of you are continuing to build those programs out. We've got facilities needs and things like that to continue that growth. And Daryl DeWall, Elizabeth, myself, and John are all really working hard on ensuring you all have the facilities and the support you need to continue to grow those research programs. Next slide, please. Well, Cougar Athletics, it's a little bit of our front porch of the institution. We had some outstanding achievements this last year. What's shown here is some of our young women on our soccer team. Last year, we went to the College Cup for the first time ever. That's the Final Four. And what happened is we made the soccer tournament and then had to play in 3 or 4 consecutive away games, including several wins over teams that had not lost there all season. It was really kind of an amazing run. It was an amazing group of young women. I had a chance to get to know several of these soccer players, and whether they're successful with the College Cup, they're successful in the classroom, and you just know 20 years from now, I'm going to be sitting down with several of these young women, and at that point asking them when they're leading major organizations to support WSU. Of course, I'll be retired by that time, but whoever's president will have that opportunity. We had great academic success with our student athletes. This last time for the 5th straight semester, our student athletes maintained their highest cumulative GPA at 3.17 in the spring of 2020. And for the first time in our history, all athletic teams averaged over a 3.0 GPA in the spring semester of 2020. Pat Chun, when he was hired, talked about that academics has to come first. If our athletes do a great job in the classroom, they're going to do a great job on the field, and that's what's important. And we're starting to really see that. Pat's also hired coaches who also believe that and emphasize the academic stature and prowess of our student athletes, and I really appreciate that. Cougar Athletics, as you know, has continued to have some financial challenges, and we talked about the need to significantly increase private giving to support Cougar Athletics. We had a record this year of $27 million in cash and pledges to Cougar Athletics. The previous record was 15 million, so they almost doubled what we have done ever in our history. And again, hats off to Pat and his team on a great job. Next slide, please. Philanthropy is going to continue to be really important for all of us. And I know the College of Medicine has had several really nice gifts over the last several years. And we want to continue to work with John T. And the development team to secure additional resources for our College of Medicine. This last year, we did 125 million in philanthropic activity. Considering the COVID-19, we were really thrilled on where we landed. And the highlight in terms of giving this last year was by Bruce Avinson and Julie Parker, who established our second endowed deanship in Murrow, as well as an endowed athletic director position. We also were really grateful to have Cougs step up, give $200,000 to contribute to COVID-19 student relief funding. These dollars are dispersed out to students and student needs. We continue to have lots of other needs, and we've complemented or supplemented these funds with money from my discretionary fund and others to get hotspots and computers and things like that that were really desperately needed during this COVID-19 time. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth now.
Thank you, Kirk. So of course, I'm just beginning to get to know the college, and I learned a great deal yesterday from the leadership team. But it's quite impressive that even in its infancy, that the College of Medicine is leading regionally and nationally in medical education and research. I understand that the college was the second medical school in the nation to build a longitudinal integrated clerkships program for all third-year clerkship students, and the first to do so across 4 statewide campuses. I am also impressed that the college's research enterprise quickly adapted to the emerging COVID-19 pandemic by developing regional and nationally recognized models and visualization tools to help health systems predict COVID-19 demand and model the response of rural and underserved populations. Next slide, please. I learned that the college recently launched the William A. Crosetto Mobile Healthcare Unit that serves as both interprofessional education site and a patient care platform, serving the medically underserved in Spokane County. And it's also serving as a COVID testing and patient monitoring site. So that's really excellent. And thank you for responding to community need. Next slide, please. This year, the college successfully implemented the first longitudinal integrated clerkships for inaugural class of third-year clinical experiences across all 4 clinical campuses. And it also launched the inaugural class of fourth-year elective and sub-internship clinical experiences. Next slide, please. Clearly, the research profile of the college is very strong and growing. The college responded to the evolving pandemic by developing several COVID-related modeling and mapping tools and added new lines of research. At the request of a major community health system partner, the College of Medicine researchers developed a modeling and mapping tool for hospitals to predict and prepare for COVID-19 related surges. FSCOM researchers also created a tool to crack COVID-19 cases in near real time for rural communities down to the county level. Next slide, please. WSU Internal Medicine Residency Program Everett is a 3-year resident training program with a focus on primary care. Based at Providence Regional Medical Center Everett, they anticipate receiving accreditation in September 2020. Is that still true? And welcoming the first residents in 2021. So I will look forward to following that and learning more about that. So now I'll turn back over to Kirk.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Fantastic. I see several questions being posed over there, and I know how many slides we have left to do. So we'll get to those particular questions as we work our way through the presentation. We'll answer those at the end. So please keep posting them, and look forward to some dialogue around that. As we talk about university finances, I just want to make sure to let you know we're going to continue to be as transparent and open with our fiscal picture as we can. I also want people, though, to understand that we'll only give information when we've got good quality information to pass out. And the state of Washington doesn't look like they're going to have a legislative session, a special session prior to the legislature meeting in January, which means that we're going to go through basically the remainder of the next several months without any real updates on where the state is in terms of public higher education funding. We'll see things about the state's maybe deficit coming out of the recession or the income coming into the state. I mean, we'll see those kind of numbers. But if you say, well, Kirk, what does that mean for our budget? What does it mean for the College of Medicine? The answer is we're just not going to know that. As soon as we have good data and information, we will feel free to pass that along, provide context to it, and move forward in that particular way. I wish we would do a special session, but they don't call university presidents and ask us that. That is in the political arena. And so what we're going to do the best that we can to just simply put forward a great case for why investment in public higher education, College of Medicine, and others is important for our state. And we've been very successful in the last several legislative sessions with those messages, and I don't anticipate that that's going to change. What I'm showing here is the same graph that those of you who have been to these town halls before have seen. What this shows is the university fiscal picture. And if you look back at FY 2013, what this graph details is whether we brought in more money than we expended or not. And 2013, we brought in about $25 million more than we spent. And then in FY 2014, we started overspending our budget. And this was across the university. It was all kinds of different areas. And that culminated in FY 2017 with a overspending of $30 million. And when I came around and visited with you all at that particular time, we talked about we were going to go on a 3-year plan to reduce our spending, the amount we were spending more than we're bringing in by $10 million a year for 3 years to get us down to a balanced budget. So in FY 2018, our target was to overspend by 20 million, 2019 by 10, and then the idea was by FY 2020 to be back in the black. Well, our deans, our vice presidents, our chancellors did a great job of managing our fiscal situation. As you can see in FY 2018, we way exceeded where we thought we would be and had a deficit of about 7 to 8 million. In FY 2020, we actually had a positive balance at the end of the year by a little bit. And then you can see the large green bar in FY 2020 that's about $28 million over. Now, if you come to my office and want to look under the desk and say, where's that 28 million bucks? You know, we got ideas, we got things we need to do, we got investments we need to make. The issue is the 28 million is distributed and it's largely at the unit level. There's a little bit of this that's central, but a lot of it is in different colleges, campuses, and units. And so this number is large enough that what we were able to do is allow a lot of those units to spend some of that accumulated net revenue to mitigate some of the budget cuts that came down the road at this particular time. So we continue to work really hard on this. And one of the reasons that we did not have to use a furlough program of any type this academic year was because of the great job that people had done on managing those finances moving forward. You can imagine if FY 2017 we had COVID-19, we would be in real difficult spot because we really just didn't have much control over our spending institution-wide. So we're going to continue to work on this, and I just wanted you to have some sense of where we are and to celebrate some success. It's not easy to get from where we were in 2016-17 to where we are in 2020, but many of you rolled up your sleeves, helped us do it. And then the key thing moving forward is to make sure we're putting the systems and things in place so we don't put ourselves back in those deficit spending categories. Next slide, please. All right. What we want to do now is hit some of our initiatives and things that we're working on now. We'll have about 5 of these, and then we'll have time for some open discussion. The system, you know, we spent the last year to year and a half developing the WSU System Strategic Plan. And what we have to do now is the hard part. That's moved from development of a plan to actually moving forward and implementation of a plan. And more important is not just implementation of the plan, but the planning process. I know John has worked with the college here a lot on planning and what things need to look like. And one of the things that you all have done a great job is tying in budget to plan. The university had not done that. We had a plan, we had a budget, and the two really didn't tie very well or at all. And so one of the key things on the system strategic plan moving forward is it's got to tie in with budget. The old saying, and many of you have heard this, right? If you want to see the priorities of an organization, you follow the money. And if we're aligning priorities with budget, then those two things, what you say you want to do and what you're spending money on, are the same thing. So we're going to keep doing that. The other thing that we want to do is make sure that we're engaging the university community around those goals and objectives and what we want to do. So one of the things we're going to do in October, is we're going to start a campus-wide discussion around things on extension and healthcare. And obviously, you all will be very involved and engaged in that, but we continue to see people say, this is a great opportunity. How do we tie these things well together and make sure that the great ideas coming out of the College of Medicine around telehealth and using that network of extension, what can we be doing to enhance what's already good and take it to that next step? We're also developing a Pullman strategic plan. I mentioned earlier that for a while, a lot of the planning was Pullman, kind of in a hub and spoke model. What was good for Pullman was good for everybody. Really what we have is not a hub and spoke model. It's an interconnected set of campuses. And that's what our planning needs to look like. So we'll have a separate Pullman strategic plan that should be approved by the regents in summer of 21. Next slide, please.
Find the
Next
mute
slide.
button. Find the unmute button. There we are.
All right.
There you go.
Oop. Go back one. Okay, Elizabeth, I think you're up next.
Okay. So I think I need the next slide then. Okay, there we go. Bar charts, one of my favorite things. I did want to give you an update on enrollment. Many of you have been asking about this system-wide. This is preliminary, unofficial data, but just to give you a sense of where we are, because obviously it connects into our financial planning in the immediate term. First of all, system-wide enrollment is down less than 2% from an all-time record high last fall of 31,607. So certainly we have fared better than many of our peer institutions. We've also maintained in that time since last year our ethnic diversity. It's about 31% overall, and as well as the percentage of first generation students, it's about 32.5. Enrollment at WSU Pullman will be down about 1,100 students to 19,851. And this is largely due to new freshmen who requested deferrals for admission to spring 2021 or fall 2021. WSU Health Sciences has the largest enrollment in its history at 1,730 students, and Global Campus, probably understandably, saw the largest increase, enrolling over 4,000 students, which is a more than 22% increase. One of the things that I did want to mention in connection to the strategic plan is that it's really clear that as a system, we need to manage enrollment and admissions generally as a system. And we're in the process of hiring a full-time vice provost for enrollment management. I believe we have had a 50% time enrollment manager for some time. And we're bringing in the finalists in the next couple of weeks and hope the search will conclude in October. So stay tuned for that. I think that person will really be a critical leadership position for managing things like financial aid, admissions across the campuses, working with the campus-based registrars, et cetera. So stay tuned on that one. Next slide. Here we go. So I think you're going to start off on this slide.
So diversity, equity, and inclusion has been an important part of what we do at WSU for some time. And I think the issues this summer around Black Lives Matter have certainly highlighted some of those particular challenges for us as a nation and a university. So we want to talk a little bit about ongoing efforts. So system-wide in 2017 in Pullman, we had some faculty, staff, and students who appropriately pointed out that the university was not making strategic investments and maybe doing the things that we needed to support a growing and ethnically diverse community of scholars and students. So out of that, 5 working groups were put together. I appreciate the leadership of Vice President for Student Affairs, Mary Jo Gonzalez, and Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Excellence, Jamie Nolan, around those 5 working groups, and actually coming out with some very strong recommendations and implemented a lot of the things that were asked about those. So what's the next step is to really stand up a President's Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the system level. We expect to stand this up sometime in the next couple weeks, and that's going to be a really important thing for that group to be empowered to continue to help shape our DEI efforts across the system. Elizabeth and I have started monthly meetings with the Black Faculty and Staff Association. And if we look at our numbers of Black faculty and staff at WSU across the system, and particularly in Pullman, the numbers are abysmal. They're very, very low. And so what we want to do is come up with some good creative ways to not just recruit, but retain Black faculty and staff. And Elizabeth's going to talk a little bit more about one of those new initiatives that she's moving forward and providing leadership on. Finally, we've got a lot of policies at WSU that have been around a long time. They were established maybe 20, 30 years ago. So nobody's ever looked at a lot of those policies and things that we do through an equity lens. So Chancellor Mel Netzhammer of WSU Vancouver and Zoe Ihegel-Strong who's Director of Native American Programs on the Pullman campus, are co-leading a group that's going to look through a lot of how we do things and what we do through that equity lens and figure out if there's things that we need to change or ways we need to communicate more effectively with the university community. So we're continuing work that's been going on for a long time, and many people on this call, this is their life's work and they do a lot of great work on there. We just want to make sure we're coordinating, supporting, and publicizing some of the great work that we're doing on this journey. So with that, Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you for some of the things that are happening out of your office.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, this fall, WSU will launch a new cluster hire, faculty cluster hire in racism and social inequality in the Americas. And the goal is to seek scholars who will contribute to work in this area and help lead institutional transformation. Just as by way of background, in recent years, academic institutions have often utilized cluster hires to attract and retain a more diverse faculty, and I've done so at my 2 previous institutions. Cluster hires allow the building of cohorts of scholars who can support and mentor each other, as well as mentor their new colleagues in a department, college, or entire institution. Aside from recruiting and retaining a more diverse faculty, when you pair this with an explicit network-based or mutual mentoring program, these cluster hires can transform the institution through the building of new curricula, research foci, and community engagement. So stay tuned for the announcement of that. We will be asking colleges to submit proposals for either single college or multiple college hires across the system. Secondly, we've had a vacant position in the provost area since May, and we're just about to put out an internal call for applications for an associate vice provost for inclusive excellence. This is someone who will bring leadership to academic affairs in leading our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. They'll work on things such as faculty hiring in general, working with tenure and promotion committees, looking at research support, faculty retention, teaching and mentoring, and curricular planning. And this will build on a lot of the work that Kirk has already mentioned, and this person will obviously coordinate with existing efforts in the Division of Student Affairs, Office of Compliance and Civil Rights, Human Resources, and all of the physical campuses and virtual campuses in the WSU system. And then finally, this may seem like a small thing, but professional leaves are an important opportunity for our tenure stream faculty to advance their scholarship. And in the past, I understand it was an unspoken rule that one was expected to be physically distant from one's home institution during such a leave. And this was brought to my attention when I immediately arrived, and it was also highlighted through a memo that Kirk and I received from Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies and a number of women faculty and staff who really pointed out some of the work-life constraints. And it's clear that making such a condition that one has to leave your home and home institution disadvantages those who have caregiving obligations or other economic or logistical constraints. So in the next call, which we're literally putting out, I just finished the memo today, we are going to make it clear that the physical location of a sabbatical will not be a criteria for evaluation of the potential effectiveness of a leave. These are the kinds of things that this policies and procedures group that Mel Netzhammer, that Kirk mentioned, these are the kinds of things that we can do to support equity, from every small policy to large initiatives as well. So I think I'll turn it back over to you.
So one of the, when I was at Kansas State University, one of the things that I felt we had there was the absolute worst and most antiquated, financial system. And then I found out when I moved to Washington State that there was actually one that was older and less modern. And so in 2016, we embarked on a journey to establish Workday as our kind of key data system for finance, human resources, and so forth. And originally, we were supposed to have Workday up and operational July 1 of 2020, but with COVID-19 and after talking to our implementation teams, they really felt another semester and 6 months to make sure we had the training, everything in place was really warranted. So we're going to be ready to go live on January 1 of 21, which seems like a long ways away, but it's going to be up. It's going to be there before we know it. We are going to have a lot of university-wide training beginning in October. There'll be 31 different training courses, 100 step-by-step reference guides, over 30 video or self-paced learning experiences. And we really are asking people to be involved in educating yourself at least as much as you need to around the Workday area. I want to express my appreciation, though, to many of our employees that work in the finance, human resources, and other areas that IT that have been really working hard to get us to this particular place. I will say this, any large endeavor, it's a 4.5-year initiative. No matter how much planning you do, there's always a few bumps in the road. And I think we'll just continue to be flexible. But I'm looking forward to the ability for all of us to use better data in decision making as we move forward. So we'll keep everybody updated on that. Next slide. So we just want to thank you. We appreciate those of you who have been with us today. We appreciate the work that you all continue to do, building out our College of Medicine. I remember attending the first white coat ceremony where we had that first set of future Coug docs walk across the stage and listen to John give his comments that I've now heard like 5 times, but that's all right. They're still good, John. And it's amazing to think that here in not too long, we will have a fully accredited medical school, as well as that first set of Coug docs walk across the stage. And what a journey. We'll all look back on this in the future. We can smile on it, but I appreciate all of you being here at a startup enterprise. And I also want to acknowledge John T's continued positive leadership and keeping us moving forward. I do appreciate it. It's been an amazing journey, and we're not there yet. I know there's a lot of work to do, but anyway, it's going to be an exciting time. So with that, we have a bunch of questions that people put out there, and what I normally like to do on some of these is allow both Elizabeth and I a chance to answer some of these. And so I'm going to start plowing through a few that have been posted. I think, Jim, you asked about exciting opportunities in all kinds of places. How confident am I our fundraising efforts are up to task of getting the investment capital to support these programs? One thing I found about medical schools is no matter how much money we raise, you guys got more ideas and need more, which is great. Right now, I don't think we have the infrastructure completely in place to support the fundraising that we need in the health sciences. That's the School of Medicine, Pharmacy, and Nursing. And I'm not disparaging some of the professionals we have in that area that have been out there and they're working their tails off to bring in dollars. One of the reasons structurally we have a vice president for health sciences and some of those is to also have an integrating function so that there may be some times instead of $1 million gift in 2 colleges, we can get a $5 million gift for a more comprehensive type of program. And I think that's what we want to continue to see and do. So there's going to have to be some additional investment that we find a way to make in major gift fundraising. There should be expectations from you all that as president, myself, John T., Daryl DeWald are out there hustling resources to allow you to do the job that you all need to do. So we got some work to do in that area, but I think we're going to keep working at it, and that's keep chipping away. We don't have graduates, to go, and while we excited to have those first group of medical students, we're having to rely on foundations, corporations, healthcare centers, and other places like that for those gifts. So, Elizabeth, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm in absorbing mode, and this has been, it's an opportunity for me to hear from you, and just seeing the questions that you submitted in advance, as well as the questions that are showing up here. Kirk and I had a chance to review those, and even though I certainly am not going to be able to answer each and every one of them. You know, knowing what the questions are really helps guide my work as I move forward. So, you know, I'm just interested in our final minutes if there are things that, John, do you want to highlight some of the high level questions that you think that we can help with today?
Well, sure. I mean, I do really appreciate Michelle's comment about range health. And, you know, we had an awesome experience down in Pullman helping out with COVID, but I'd be curious to hear from you and or Kirk how you think we can leverage range health and as that grows, you know, into the WSU strategic plan.
Well, John, let me start by expressing my appreciation to you and your colleagues for redeploying range health on very short notice. And I understand that it wasn't like everybody was just sitting around with nothing to do. You know, there were healthcare obligations and communities in need, and you all were able to find a way to help us out with that. We also received a lot of positive statewide publicity on range health being there, the College of Medicine supporting in this kind of a time, and so forth. So I think, you know, the key thing is, as I've learned as president, right, it's two parts. One, it's competence and doing a great job. The second part is telling everybody that you're doing a great job. And so often land-grant universities were really good at one and we're not real good at two. And I think one of the things that I want to make sure that we're doing a great job of, working with the Marcom colleagues in the College of Medicine at the university level and Spokane level, is what kind of things can we always be doing to remind people of the investments made and the payoff that's there. I could see us eventually having multiple of those type of units dispersed all over the state. And let's just pretend you have something like the fires that are happening now, or something in another place in the state that, hey, WSU Medicine is the first folks on the ground there with resources to help with state-related things in rural and underserved areas. You all are already doing that, but can you imagine having 5 or 6 of those kind of units and the ability for the dean and others to say, hey, we need to be in this particular area, we're going to be there tomorrow, and being that first online showing up to do that. Those are the types of things that communities notice and they appreciate a great deal. And I think that's going to be an important thing that we can do with range health. The other thing is Daryl DeWald has talked a lot about using the moniker WSU Health to talk about medicine, nursing, and pharmacy. If you watch, back when we could watch college football games on TV, you know, you found a lot of places that would talk about Stanford Health or UCLA Health or something like that. I think it's important that we also have a key marketing overreach that describes nursing, pharmacy, and medicine when we're all engaged, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's all of you working together as healthcare professionals that are making a big difference. So I think we got opportunities, and I think the fact that we were able to deploy to Pullman in a crisis, at least for the Pullman community, shows what we can do. And you know, I was walking through our new baseball facility the other day as we're building it, and I was talking to our athletic director saying, what we've got to do now is this is great for baseball, but we got to leverage this success to other things that we need. I would say the same with range health. Now people got some sense of what it is, maybe. How can we leverage that? How can I leverage it? How can our fundraising team leverage that to bring more resources to bear? Because then you point to it, say, this is what we talked about on that proposal. You can see it, you can feel it. And I think that's an important step.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, I think in general, you know, Kirk's absolutely right that land grant institutions, public universities often, you know, we're focused on our academic colleagues and we're not really thinking about our public perception. And this is no slight to our marketing communications, but this is just true at every public institution that I've been at in my entire career. And so, you know, one of the things that I did when I was a dean, well, that was just 2 months ago. It sounds like back when I was a dean in June, seems like a long time ago, is I tried to get my faculty and even grad students to publish little short things in Inside Higher Ed and in The Conversation. And it's amazing how one little short piece that's only as long as an email you might send one of 100 on a typical day, they take it and run with it, and these things go absolutely viral. The cluster hire program that I was just talking about, I wrote a letter in response to someone saying that cluster hires only work at rich universities. And there I was at SUNY Binghamton, and we were, and at UMass, and we had significant financial issues at those institutions, major millions of dollars of shortfalls. And so I wrote this letter to Inside Higher Ed, didn't even know if they would pick it up, but it ended up, I got a lot of emails and they wanted to hear about what we were doing. So I would say, all of the work that you're doing, I mean, obviously what I presented today, I'm learning some of it for the first time myself, shouted from the rooftops. Even little small articles like that are open source will then get lots of traction, and anything we can do to help by having our communications and marketing people, or I have my, newsletter that I send out, but even more public would be best.
If I can, in the chat, I think Christina asked a question about reputational challenges prior to and during COVID around finances, leadership, diversity, COVID cases. I think it's a great question. And I do think about this a lot. My perspective on this is we always want to be, and I always want to be as president, upfront about the challenges, admit when we make mistakes, and try not to make them a second time. And I know that sounds so elementary, but what I think we need to do is then perform at a high level on some of the areas. And I'll use finances as a great example. We were beat up quite a bit a couple of years ago around the finances of the university and athletics, and nobody was tending shop and some of those things. And when we restore our finances, it's not nearly as an exciting a story as it is when we're overspending and things like that. So I think we just want to continue to admit it when we did something wrong or screw up. And I've tried to not point fingers at predecessors or other people, but I feel leaders myself have to sometimes just simply step up and say, hey, whether I'm personally responsible, doesn't matter. I'm leading the organization. We got some challenges that we got to deal with. So we're going to keep working on that. I would say around the country, if you got 6 or 8 public university presidents together, we would all point to the same thing, and we can point to a lot of different things. The last thing I'll mention is that, right or wrong, right now, the climate in the United States is a lot of finger pointing, and if we look at social media, where it was 5 years ago, and where is it today in terms of just the tone. And so I think there's almost a little bit of celebration out there when something isn't successful or somebody takes a reputation hit. That seems strange to me, but that's just a little bit where we are. So I'm going to continue to emphasize the good, take responsibility, make sure we don't make mistakes a second time, and try and be as transparent as we can, whether people want to always hear that or not. And that may not be the right solution, but at least that's what I'm going to try and do, continue to try and do as president. So that's a great question. And if you have suggestions, or anybody on here does, always willing to hear about those and see what we can do to continue to do a great job. I want to be sure that we don't get so worried about reputation and perception that we stop doing the job that we need to. And I've worked for a couple people that were so perception focused that I think we didn't do the things that we needed to at times because that was what they were worried about.
Kirk and Elizabeth, maybe one last question to sort of finish up on. You've spent a lot of time talking about systemness, and WSU is one system. And the College of Medicine seems perfectly positioned with now over 154 clinical partners. We're on 4 of the WSU campuses, and we're spread throughout the state. We're one of the few colleges that has research partnerships internally with every other college. And then we have, a host of, 20 other partners across the state and beyond that we're partnered with. So I was hoping maybe you and Elizabeth could just wrap up with, your ideas of how the College of Medicine fits into this system, the WSU system going forward, and, how we can be a great partner to the university in that endeavor.
I mean, I will just say, that having come from two large statewide university systems, the examples that you gave are exactly what you want to try to achieve, right? That the systemness facilitates and promotes the work of the faculty and the curricular programs and our engagement with communities. But I have been, I haven't been here long enough but it's clear that there are kinks in the system. And I've certainly been in previous systems where the system either did too much in some areas and not enough in other areas. And I know that that's what Kirk and I and the system strategic plan and the roles and responsibilities report, this is what we're all really focused on. So success stories like what you're talking about are going to be really important as we guide how we should branch this out to all of the colleges and to all of the physical campuses.
John, let me say that I think the College of Medicine has paved the way in this regard. And there's some things that as we got started on other campuses and trying to figure out finances and all that stuff, it showed a couple things. It showed that every campus does it a little bit differently. And that this is something that we might have said, hey, there should be some consistency in this. And I shouldn't have to redo this 5 times. There's some things like that I think we have learned from medicine being everywhere. I also think that medicine has shown the possibilities of using and utilizing our geographic diversity in a positive sense. If I look at getting stuff through the legislature, I get to sit down with an awful lot of elected officials and say, you got medical students in your community at WSU. And man, that's not something in Pullman or Eastern Washington. It's all over. And so I think we've got a little bit of a flavor for that. Some things in a system should be centralized. It's more efficient. We don't need to duplicate it. But on the other hand, there are some things that need to be close to the customer base or need to be close to the community. And people want to try and either say it all ought to be dispersed or it all ought to be centralized. And it's not that simple. We need to look at each function and decide how to do that. And centralization, last thing I'll say on this, does not mean Pullman. Maybe the right place to centralize something is Spokane or Vancouver. It doesn't always have to be centralized on the flagship campus. And so I think that's something that we got to look at and say what location makes the most sense to do something as opposed to history. Finally, Jennifer posted something, and I appreciate that, around graduate medical education and GME. I would say that John T. has engaged myself and Daryl and others almost exclusively at this point on how can we expand the GME opportunities in the state of Washington and the region. That's some new partnerships, and to me, I put in 2 buckets. There's some quick hit type things that we can do through purchase of programs and other types of things that will help. But how do we bring some additional new GME opportunities on board that are not wrestling some away that UW has control over or something like that? And I think that's an opportunity that we want to continue to be creative. But I will say the leadership team in medicine has got the leadership of the university well aware that it's not just walking MDs across the stage. It's the 4 years of that education and training, and that we've got to have more opportunities for those students at the GME level if they're going to be successful and in communities in underserved areas where they want to serve. And so it's not just more, it's also more where they're located and how we manage that. So stay tuned. We're working on it, and if it were easy, frankly, it'd been done before, but we're going to keep at it. So folks, thank you. Appreciate the time. Proud of what you do. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs. Thank you, Kirk and Elizabeth.